And we're live. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras. As every week, I'm joined by Glenn Highcove, who is joining me once again from California. How are you feeling, man? And, are you excited about this case?
Yeah, definitely. How I'm feeling. I had a long day of being at the beach and being in the ocean and body surfing and all kinds of stuff. About this case, yeah, this case is fascinating. It's fascinating because there's so much material on it, so much good material out there. I know when I did the research, shout out. This is one of many shout outs to Stephanie Harlow, who had great episodes, very comprehensive. I mean, she must have done almost 3 hours on it. But this is also like one of the cringiest cases in terms of like the behavior of certain people in this thing
Yeah.
that I think we've ever, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, obviously, when it comes to violence and things like that, domestic violence and family murders and things like that, that's not cringe. But there's a certain person in this case who his behavior, you know what I mean? You know what I mean by like cringe? When like someone does something so embarrassing that like you feel embarrassed and you don't even want to like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I definitely know, but and I know who you are referring to, but for me, I wouldn't say it's cringe, even though I get it how it could be cringe, but I think it's cringe to certain type of people. For me, it's like just weird and creepy. I don't really cringe for him, like, but I do cringe. I do cringe for like, I know, like kids making TikTok videos, but like for this person that you're referring to, I'm like, this is more of like I'm fascinated by his creepiness. I'm not even cringing at it. I'm like, let's see what else this creepy, sob was up to. That's how I feel about the individual that you are referring to.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna probably allude to this a couple times, but for this person who is sort of almost the start of the case. By the way, it's funny because so when I started doing research on this, I was watching the big long Stephanie Harlow series on it, um, and my wife and my kid were like, "Wait, what's this case about?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, they haven't even gotten to like the lady this is about because this whole thing really starts
Yeah.
way far back with someone else's life first, like basically a generation, like the parent of the culprit,
Yeah.
basically.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe the parent is also the culprit. It's one of the
that's
things
true.
to discuss. Anyways, we're going to be discussing the disappearance of Susan Powell. So, really, just want to give the contents, the table of contents, I guess, for this week's show for everyone. So, we're going to be discussing the case. We're going to be going over the timeline. During the timeline, we're going to be going back and forth with Glenn. Various very interesting, disturbing details in this case. It's an infamous case. I think a lot of you guys may already have heard about the disappearance of Susan Powell and then Joshua Powell, and the murder suicide that he committed later on. Let's and then I guess theories. Now for the theories, this case is kind of solved, and I think the general in general, I think people kind of already know what actually happened in terms of Susan Powell, but we don't know exactly how it happened. Like she disappeared, and I think we all know why she disappeared, but we don't really know how she disappeared. Like we don't know the exact details. So there's something we could definitely discuss here. I really quickly want to read a short description of this case before I jump into the timeline for the people who have not heard of the disappearance of Susan Powell. So Susan Mary Powell, she is an American missing person from West Valley City in Utah, whose disappearance and presumed murder, as well as the subsequent investigation and events, garnered national media attention. Susan's husband, Joshua Powell, was named a person of interest in the investigation into her disappearance, but was never charged. On February 5th, 2012, so 3 years after Susan disappeared, Joshua killed himself and their two young sons, Charles Joshua and Braden Timothy. So I think Charles at that point was 7, and Timothy must have been 5, around those ages, because one was born in 2005 and the other was born in 2007. Now, this was a murder suicide and happened after uh, custody of the boys had been awarded to Susan's parents, Charles and Judy Cox, because at that point everyone believed that Joshua Powell had killed his wife. Therefore, and other things happened. They found stuff on his computer that raised suspicions, etc., etc. Let's get into the timeline. I'm gonna be like handing it over to Glenn a lot. I think definitely he is more knowledgeable about this case. I had kinda a really hectic week on my end, so I'm gonna be more of the mediator, but I think like really the sauce will be provided by Glenn. So let's jump into it. So the timeline that I have actually starts out in 2007. So when you referred, dude, to that one individual, which would be Joshua's father, Steven Powell. We could go even way back to his childhood and how he was raised. Maybe we could save that for our theories part, when we kind of are wrapping up, if you have any points to mention there. So if you don't mind, I would like to start out the timeline in 2007, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So at that point, Joshua Powell and Susan Powell had been married for a handful of years. They already had 2 little kids. As I've mentioned, Braden and Charles, one was born in 2005, the other was born in 2007. But now by 2007, the Powells had filed for bankruptcy with $200,000 in debt. All right, so I don't know, immediately want to jump to this little point in time. So this was due to Joshua's Powell's, how should I put it, extravagant expenses, right, dude?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. I mean, extravagant is a great word for it. It's almost hard to find words that even exceed. I would almost say ridiculous expenses, if that's like worse than extravagant.
Yeah, facts. Now, let's jump to Saturday, June 28th, 2008. So let's move 1 year further. Now, Susan Powell, the woman that is missing in this case that we're talking about here, writes a letter addressing to family and friends, warning them of Josh. In the letter, Susan says Josh threatened to destroy her if she filed for divorce. She then said that if she dies, quote, it may not be an accident, even if it may look like one, end quote. The letter was kept in Susan's safe deposit box, which only she had access to. So really quickly, I want to hand it over to you. I will still assume that a lot of people already know the premise of this case. So would you say that the disappearance, we all know what happened truly, but the disappearance was caused maybe because she was bringing up divorce to Josh, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. It seemed. I mean, there were a couple reasons why that would be problematic for him. Some are financial, some are maybe personal or psychological, um, and some may be, I mean, for however much he cared about his reputation with the community, which I don't know, that might be the least, most prominent reason. But yeah, I mean, he had a lot of motives to, do something.
Yeah, and then we all seen, at least I know that you and myself have seen the video that Susan Cox Powell recorded, because apparently her attorney or something like that said that it's a good idea to maybe record a video of like herself, disclosing her concerns for her own well-being and displaying the extravagant expenses that her husband, Josh Powell, was making. All the power drills, computers, all kinds of unnecessary crap that I would assume Joshua never even used. So for everyone who's listening to this, you could find the video on YouTube. It's kind of fascinating to see all the unnecessary crap that Joshua was purchasing. Dude, your take on that whole situation?
That video is really interesting because when you listen to Susan document everything, I mean, you can hear it in her voice. Before she even, at some point in the video, she gives kind of the rationale for why she's doing things, and I guess would add some color commentary. But in her voice, you can hear probably some amount of frustration and almost like bewilderment that this is what our marriage has become. I think as but as you actually just listen to the list of things that her husband Josh has purchased for, supposedly for them, for their family, but really for himself. I mean, it's all over the place, and every single thing is like either a premium item or maybe like an item that somebody who was a little bit like self-centered and didn't really know what they were doing thought was premium. If that makes sense. You know
Oh,
what I mean? Like, well, TV told me this is what's important, so this is what I'm going to buy.
yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
He.
So it was.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say, he had like all kinds of stuff, like power drills, a computer, like hoses, like what? Goddamn! Like, was he even using those items? Do you think?
That was the craziest part. So yeah, I mean, it was like, and here's the thing. I think this is going to be a little bit of a theme as we do this show is on some level, not for like the horrible stuff he did level, but on some level, I guess maybe living in this culture and, you know, probably having my own struggles, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Lots of guys have struggles with kind of different aspects of their lives, but kind of also maybe even like the end result of all the marketing and stuff. But this is a guy that
Mm-hmm.
who had a habit of like being really ambitious for like 10 seconds. Like he had a really bad attention span, or he didn't like to. It's almost like the idea of a job or the idea of work was more interesting than when it actually came down to doing it.
Yeah.
So he was really good at like I guess buying things for this job or this task or this project he was going to do, and then when it came to actually doing the project,
Mm-hmm.
this guy had no character at all. Like he
Yeah.
did, and by character I mean like stick to itiveness, like persistence. He had no ability. He had no inner strength. So like we were talking about this before the show. Like I was frustrated because I even like I've been doing home improvement stuff, but I actually do it right. But like he would buy like a drill, and he wouldn't just buy like a like I bought a drill for myself, but I bought like a Harbor Freight like $60 drill. Oh no, this dude's buying like probably the $150 Milwaukee Tools
Mm.
drill that he's never going to use, and he had no joke like 200 of these kind of things where like he had literally the assets, the tools, whatever it is, to do 200 different jobs. And then he never friggin' he never did it. He never did
Yeah.
the actual job. So it was like you could see where if you were married to this guy, I mean, at some point, like there's a pattern that was clear a long time ago, and it's probably only just that Susan was such a nice person and relatively naive because she was so much younger than he was, and went into this marriage with good faith. That at some point, like not just the attorney, I'm sure other people she knew are telling her like, no, this guy's a loser. Like there's something wrong here. My husband doesn't buy, you know, 400 different things and put us into bankruptcy and then not actually do the job.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Regarding their age difference, I just want to quickly give some context. So, Joshua Powell, he was born on 1976, and Susan Powell was born on 1981. That would give them an age difference of 5 years, which is at that point, I guess as you get older and older, like it becomes less of a age gap, but at that point in their life, yeah, you're correct. It still was a big difference. Now, I want to quickly hand it over to you without belaboring this whole expenditure thing too much, because I do feel it's kind of important for us to gauge, the whole situation better. If I'm not mistaken, the money to purchase all of these things that Joshua would never use, and Susan claims this in her video, came out of her pocket, like out of her earnings. Because if I'm not mistaken, Joshua didn't really have any money whatsoever at that point. So he was buying unnecessary crap out of her, wife's credit card, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the credit cards, it was everything. Like every time, and this wasn't just her, this was other relationships he, well, the small amount of relationships he'd had before this, he would, he was almost like a classic abuser in
Whoa,
this sense, in that he would always seize financial control over the person he was in the relationship with, and just take the money. You know what I
whoa.
mean? Yeah,
Oh,
actually, one of his previous, I think the only other
mhm.
previous girlfriend he had, this lady still owes money in her school loans, because the school loan check came and he was like, "Oh, I'll just take that," and cashed, in the bank.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Okay.
she still owes money on it. It's crazy.
Uh, I,
Um,
I
yeah,
believe it's Catherine Terry Everett, right? His first relationship, whom he
yeah,
met at the
yeah.
local LDS church congregation. So really quickly, do you wanna just for the better background here? Do you wanna add anything to his LDS church background? Because apparently, just really quickly, I wanna add my 2 cents. Is that from what I've gathered, he had a love-hate relationship with the LDS church congregation. Now, I know he wasn't a devout anything, especially later on in his life, but it does say that his father, Joshua's father, Steven Powell, kind of wanted to diverge his children from the LDS church. But then later on in his life, Joshua finds himself in his late teen years still hanging out in the church, LDS church, like congregations, meeting women. So it's like, was it like he kept coming back to the LDS church? Like, what is his background with all of this and how he met Susan? Do you want to elaborate on that? Just a tiny bit.
Yeah, it's pretty central to this whole thing, um, because it's kind of it's for, unlike the the culprit side. It's a point of contention, and I guess a point of like a source of, let's call it stress in the relationship, not just from Josh, but really from his father, before him. Um, but it's also one of the main sources for the community. Now, I'm just going to throw in this disclaimer, which we did, I think, for that was it. Chad Daybell. Remember the
Of
other episode we
course,
did where the
of
kind of,
course. Yeah.
yeah, where the people went off the rails, was that, we are for sure not going to say anything bad about the Mormon Church here, nor why would we, right? There's nothing bad to say, but we're gonna, I think, really, I'm especially going to be pretty sympathetic to what sounds like a lot of community support that Susan and, I think Josh's mother had before them, from that community. But it's also really central to the plot line here, because this is how everybody meets each other. This is why there's sort of, and I'm explaining this, if I'm going a little bit long with the explanations, because I don't know necessarily in Europe, um, like, because we have listeners obviously all over the world. In other parts of the world, the Mormon Church may not be as familiar an institution to you. And the part of the North America that, Josh and Susan come from, in the specific states and the communities they're in, the church is very central. So, like, the church encourages kind of people to stay within the religious community. They offer a lot of support. And it even comes down to like the pressure that Josh felt to get married, because apparently there's actually like an actual statement, I think, from the founder of the Mormon Church, saying that like men who are like older than 24, who aren't, I'm paraphrasing here, but men who are older than 24 who aren't married are like a threat. There's like they're not viewed well. So there's some pressure to get married early,
Hmm.
and get going with a family. Mormon Church is about family, and you know I think there's some kind of endorsement if you're in that community, that like if you're part of that community, I think that someone else in that community would see you as good marriage material, both for the obvious reason that there's a lot of pressure
Hmm.
to stay within the religion, right? Which happens in a lot of religious communities. I mean, that's no different than like Islam or like Hasidic Jews, or et cetera. But it's also because it's almost like there's a little bit of an endorsement of
Yeah.
that person, that hey, they're living our lifestyle. This is going to be a compatible lifestyle, right? You're both coming from the same background, so in theory, not what happened here, but in theory, this is like supposed to be a good match for you, because you're both in theory going to come with the same expectations, and that's probably where this goes off the rails in a couple different ways.
Oh yeah, because I think Susan's expectations were kind of different going into this, I would assume. Now, let's jump to the day in question, which would be Sunday, December 6th, 2009. Susan Cox Powell goes missing. So Susan is missing now at 12 p.m. We have the first time stamp on December 6th, 2009. By the way, this is happening less than 500 days after Susan records that video explaining her concerns for her safety and their relationship. So less than 500 days later, she's missing. It's like Susan definitely knew way so real quickly, it seemed that Susan knew this for a very long time, that this will go out of hand eventually, because like it's their relationship was like breaking apart, but like over a very very long time frame. So I think this is important for it, because I don't think that this was like I think it was building up, wouldn't you say? Because like she guessed it, like f- like she guessed it like way way like a year and a little bit in advance, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And once again, this is not unlike a lot of other religions. Um, but interestingly, I didn't know this until I got more into the research for this episode. Apparently, in the Mormon Church, marriage is not just for life. In theory, according to like the doctrine, if I understand it right, it's sort of like an eternal marriage. So they're saying like once you go to heaven or whatever, the afterlife, you're still married. So while
Mm.
divorce does, you know what I mean? So while divorce is not impossible, there's like an extra, I guess, kind of community resistance against it. If that makes sense.
Because you can divorce in real life, but then when you die in the afterlife, you're still kind of in the same marriage and you can't divorce there. Does it say if you can divorce there?
I mean, I think it's just more like it was such a serious. It was such a I guess marriage is not meant to be taken lightly. Both getting into it, and then like because I mean, obviously anyone who's listened to the show has heard me kind of rant, and I won't do it here about.
Yeah.
I'll give everybody a break, because I think this was definitely a case where there needed to be a divorce. This one and the one before it with Josh's parents. Yeah, divorce was definitely warranted. Yeah, but so it's more like, this was supposed to be like a binding agreement for eternity, and you were supposed to have married like your life, your eternal partner, and now for that to unravel is sort of admitting failure in a couple different, like on more levels than just
Mm.
your relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, makes perfect sense. So, going back to December 6th, 2009 at 12 p.m., Susan Powell takes her two sons Charlie and Braden to services at her local ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints, LDS Church. So at this point, I feel like one of the turmoils that were causing, like one of the big things that was causing the turmoil in Susan's and Josh's relationship was the fact that at this point Josh wasn't attending the church, right?
Yeah, and that's like a big no-no because some of the stuff that goes on,
Mm,
you can only be there if you're going to the church. If you're like a normal church member. So
yeah.
like I think there was one of these family events. I can't remember what it was now offhand, where like half of Josh's family couldn't go because they weren't part of the church anymore.
Oh, all right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
In the afternoon of the same day at 5 p.m., a neighbor visits Susan at her home, and then she leaves at approximately 5 p.m. as Susan lies down for a nap. And this is the last time Susan was seen alive by anyone outside of her family's home. So the kids are in the house, Josh is in the house, Susan is in the house, and now their neighbor also visits. So I had some research on this particular point done. So if I'm not mistaken, Josh was really insistent at one point to get this neighbor out of the house, right?
Yeah, it was this is something I wanted to ask you because the way it was described, it was like he prepared the meal and he did this whole thing of like cooking and like cleaning up afterwards and like this whole I thought at first it was described, I thought, well, he's putting on a show, to show publicly like he's some kind of great husband. But now I'm wondering, do you think he drugged her?
I have no idea. I have no idea, but that's an interesting point of view. I never really even considered this fact because it does seem strange that Susan takes well, it doesn't because I take naps at 5 p.m. all the time, but I take naps at 5 p.m. during the workday. This was the Sunday. So I don't take naps at 5 p.m. on a Sunday. That's kind of maybe not that widely, I don't know, done by people. So you have a point here. It could be the case, but really quickly. So then, okay, so really quickly. So this is the day when she disappears forever, and we still don't know what happened to her. Well, we kind of know, but we don't know exactly how it happened. But what do you think was the cause? Because if Joshua is already putting up a show for the neighbor, and let's say he drugs her. Let's just say that's the case. This would indicate that he had made up his mind that day to make her disappear. But then again, um, do you think that's the case? That he already, since he woke up that morning in his head, he already knew that he was gonna make his wife disappear, or do you think something later on in the night caused him to do it? Like it was like a breaking point was reached, or do you think he knew already?
Yeah, it's I wish we had a little more about what his behavior was besides that day. You know what I mean? In terms of like people visiting and saying whether that was his normal thing to. Well, I know. Well, I'll tell you one clue without even. Sorry to just kind of
Of
digress for a
course, of
second.
course.
He was trying to rush the neighbor out of the house,
Hmm.
so he kept like trying to he kept on saying like, well, like I need to take I forget where he was taking the kids.
Okay, I have
Um,
I have this point.
yeah.
I have this point. Let me finish up the timeline in the day, the whole day, and then it's really quickly. The whole day has four more points in the timeline, and then we can talk about it a little bit more. So let's trace it back a little bit before 5 a.m. when the neighbor actually leaves the house, to 8:30 p.m., Susan had called a friend from her cell phone, and this is the last call she made or received on her phone. As I've said, at 5 p.m., after the neighbor leaves, Josh takes the kids sledding, takes Charles and Braden sledding. Now, this is the creepy part for me. He takes them sledding at 5 p.m. in the evening. He returns he returns 3 hours and 30 minutes later. So at 8:30 p.m., a neighbor sees Josh Powell return home and pull into the garage. But now at 11:45 p.m., so right around midnight, a neighbor heard a car alarm coming from inside the Powell's closed garage. All the lights in the home appeared to be off. So he took the kids sledding. So, in my head, do we know for a fact that this was not the time when he, let's just put it out there, got rid of Susan? Or did he actually do it on the 12 p.m. trip? Because I kind of now have my suspicions that he may have done it on the 5 a.m. right after the neighbor leaves. Then he returned at 8:30, and at that point Susan is somewhere else already. Then he goes to the site as a red herring.
Oh, that's a good point. I thought, wasn't there one of the neighbors that said that they heard some kind of argument where he was like basically forcing her into the car or demanding that she go into the car? Yeah.
I have no clue, but it seems like it's a vital thing that I probably should know, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I thought that there was one of, so I mean, here's the thing. There's like a lot of different things, not just about like what the neighbors saw or heard, but also like when the kids get interviewed later, there's a little bit of like misinformation from the kids because like 4-year-olds are not good witnesses. Um, but yeah, there's like I'm just trying to see real quick in the investigation whether that came up. But yeah, as I understand it, there had been some kind of, someone had overheard an argument that I guess was either in the driveway or the garage, where they were trying to, where the neighbor was saying that like, oh, they were arguing about going on this trip, and he's like, get in the car, like he had somehow forced her in. Now, what I would say is, wouldn't that be interesting if he had drugged her first and thought that he was going to, like, I don't know, carry her to the car? And meanwhile, one of the descriptions, because here's the thing, every time he had like some kind of project that, by the way, he would just shamelessly ask for help for like any kind of, like work around the house or, like home improvement project. And then, these poor, like kindly neighbors was, okay, I'll help you. And then like, he would just let them do all the work. They said he had no physical strength at all. So that's part where I'm kind of wondering, how did this dude even, I mean, to me, I'm surprised his wife didn't kick his ass if he actually tried something. It's almost like the Barry Sherman thing, where it's like no one believed that he killed his wife because he was such a a weak little like kind of bookworm guy. But this guy like apparently has no like he didn't exercise. He wasn't fat. He wasn't out of shape. But he literally had no like,
Okay.
there was nothing, nothing to him. So I'm like, how did that's what I don't get in this whole thing is, other than using his words, how did he convince her to get in the car if she thought she was going to get killed? Like, how would he even do it? So that's the part that I don't get, is
Yeah.
unless he drugged her where she was like kind of like not in her full faculties. But then here's the thing, he drugs her, say hypothetically he drugs her, she gets knocked out, and like in his mind and his little plot, he's like, well, I'm going to drag her into the car. Oh yeah, you try dragging like someone who weighs 150 pounds, however much she weighed, right?
Wait. Wait, do we know for a fact that when he leaves with the boys sledding at 5 p.m., do we know for a fact that he didn't take Susan with them? Because if he did, maybe it was just a regular day in the office for the family. They go sledding, but now on the sledding trip, maybe Susan expresses her wishes of a divorce or something else that Josh doesn't like, and then he comes back into the house, potentially kills her, puts her in the trunk. Because let's remember those two fans and the blood found at the house. So I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
there's some sort of an assault happening inside of the house. Let's continue, man, because let's continue in the timeline, unless you have something else to add, because I think
No,
we have,
no.
yeah, we I think the following days time points will definitely unveil more clues in this whole situation. Now let's jump right after midnight. So the day is now shifting to December 7th, 2009. Now this was Monday, but apparently Josh believed it was still Sunday, because that's why he took the kids on a camping trip on the middle of the night. So Josh Powell said he left his home with Charlie, who was 4, and Braden, who was 2, to go camping at Simpsons Spring Campground in a remote area of Utah's West Desert. During this time, he claimed that Susan was at home asleep after cleaning the red stain from the carpet. The campground is about 2-hour drive from West Valley City. Temperatures were below freezing that night, so it's kind of strange to take your kids camping. But now let's unwrap what I've just read here. So Joshua Powell said he left his home with the 2 kids, and uh, he says that his wife Susan is still at the house and she's like taking a nap or something like that. But now one of the kids, when he was asked, I think it was Charlie, he said that the mom did go to the camping trip with them, but she didn't come back. So what this entail? And one of them expressed that she was in the trunk. Now, how I see it, she must have been in the trunk as they were approaching the campground, because what I'm trying to say here, it doesn't really make sense for her to be in the trunk as they're going back home. You know what I mean? I'm kind of assuming that she's in the trunk while they're driving to the camp spot. Now, this would kind of entail that he did, in fact, murder his wife inside of the home, then put her in the trunk. That's why one of the kids was like, Mom was in the trunk. And we all went on this camping trip. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And like you said, that's why the kid says, "Oh yeah, mommy went on the trip," and but then he doesn't have a lot of good level of detail about what her what her level of activity was on the trip. And then, oh yeah, she didn't come back though.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, let's jump to the morning hours. 9 a.m. The daycare provider for Charlie and Braden contacts Josh Powell's mother, Tarika, and his sister Jennifer Greaves, concerned that she could not reach either parent, meaning she could not reach Susan or Joshua, because they failed to drop off their sons to daycare. Now, Susan's mother, Terika, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, Joshua Powell's mother, I'm sorry, Terika, and sister Jennifer call the police, who break into the Powell home, worried the family may be victims of carbon monoxide poisoning. Police find 2 box fans blowing on a wet spot on the carpet. Susan does not show up to work and she's reported as missing. So no one's at the house. 9 so Joshua, we presume, kills his wife, puts her in the trunk, drives with the kids to a camping place in Simpson's Spring Campground. 10 a.m. hits, the morning time. The kids don't show up for daycare. The daycare worker contacts Joshua and Susan, can't get a hold of them, contacts Joshua's mother, Terrica. Terrica comes into the house. She's like, we can't get in. They might have had like carbon monoxide poisoning, calls the cops. They break in the house. They don't find anyone because let's remember, we still believe that at this point, Joshua is with the kids and, potentially had already dumped Susan's body somewhere, maybe in one of those mine shafts that are down in the area. But now there are two box fans blowing on a wet spot on the carpet, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, wet spot on the carpet. Two box fans blowing on a wet spot on the carpet. Dude, your take on what's happening right there?
That's what I'm trying to understand how. Well, because like if you use a firearm, the cops often will like run like a gunshot residue test in your hands and your clothing, because when you shoot a gun, um, it may not seem like it, but a tremendous amount of like kind of stuff comes out of it on both sides, both the barrel and
Mhm.
the victim side, but also on the receiver side. Um, there's like it's actually pretty hard to not get stuff all over yourself without a lot of care. So I'm like, okay, well, if he didn't shoot her, because you never hear anything about any firearms, then he would have had to either do something physically or poison her, right? I mean, how's and then if it's a physical struggle, how did he do it without
Uh,
he himself getting up? Yeah.
later on in the timeline, they do find traces of her blood in the house and DNA of an unidentified male, another male's.
Uh,
So let's add this into the conversation. What does this tell us?
yeah. So even 2-on-1, that seems a little bit easier, especially if the person was asleep. So um, I'll give an example. Uh, there was a cult in India. Um, it was a kind of a while ago. It was called the Thuggee cult, and what they would do is, this is back in the kind of the old days of India. You'd have people traveling all over the place, right?
Hmm.
Like if you didn't even have trains yet or anything. So if you wanted to go from one part of India to another, you would join up with a group of other people going in the same direction. And what happened is this cult would actually have like people that would like kind of join the group undercover, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And anyways, long story short, what they would do is at night when everybody was asleep, they would they would put together the plan. One person would hold down the other person's hands while the second person or third person would strangle the person. Does that make sense? So the victim.
Yeah.
So one person would kind of disable the sleeping person and maybe keep them from crying out, and then so like this used to
Yeah.
happen all the time. So
Right.
this used to so what my point is, you know, if she was already maybe either had been poisoned or given a sedative or something, so she couldn't really properly defend herself.
Hmm.
That to me makes more sense. How one or more people could, you know, potentially strangle her
Yeah.
or otherwise take care of her.
But.
Because otherwise, I'm
Mhm.
like how do you have a physical struggle? And this is not a guy that did MMA or anything, right? He's not a martial arts expert.
I,
He doesn't know how to do a rear
yeah.
naked choke, does he? Right? I mean, how does he know how to kill his wife and not get scratches all over his face and arms?
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe there's some answers to your questions literally right now in the next point in the timeline. Besides, I want to quickly propose the speculation that maybe the unidentified male DNA is not connected to the case. I mean, I don't know like what kind of DNA it was, so we don't know for a fact that it was two people. killing her. But now, one interesting point I want to discuss. So at 5 p.m. on the second day, so we're talking about December 7th. So when everyone's like, where is the family? The family had disappeared. But now, all of a sudden, at 5 p.m., Joshua Powell returns home with Charlie and with Braden, but with no Susan. Susan's not anywhere. Now, he is greeted by the police, and they actually check his van, and inside of the van that he took like the kids with, and we believe in the trunk he stored Susan, they find Susan's cell phone uh, in the center console, almost like hidden a little bit. Well, I'm not really sure, but the SIM card was removed. Uh, Also, police found a generator, blankets, a gas canister, traps, as well as a shovel. Josh was unable to explain why he had Susan's phone or why the SIM card was taken out. Josh was immediately taken to the West Valley City Police Department to be questioned. Note: Powell was never arrested in the case, despite the long held belief by many that he had murdered Susan. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is there's Susan's phone in the center console of his van, which is interesting because let's remember he later on claims that Susan was not on the trip with the boys. He claims that Susan was, I think, sleeping after she was done cleaning that wine spill on the carpet. Maybe that's why he was kind of hoping to derail the investigation and justifying the two like fans blowing in the wet spot on the carpet. Also, it could have actually been the case. Maybe it was the case. Maybe he did kill Susan, but maybe the fans, the box fans blowing at a wet spot, maybe that's literally what it was. Maybe it was blowing on a carpet, which is kind of an maybe not unusual way of cleaning wine spills. I don't know, maybe it works well with that. So I don't want to cast any you know unnecessary misinformation here, so maybe that's the case. But we know for a fact that they found Susan's phone. So Susan's phone is in the center console. So how do you explain this, dude? Like how do you put this detail in our grand scheme of things theory here? Why was Susan's phone in the center console? Maybe as he put her in the trunk and as he proceeded to stash her body in one of the mines potentially, or somewhere else, he found a phone on her, maybe wanted to check what was on the phone and accidentally forgot to throw it away and just kept it at the center console. Maybe that's what's happening here, because why else would he bring the phone back? That's a bad strategic move for him right there.
Yeah, I agree. I doesn't. I mean, I guess the question is, and this is like it gets a little weird with the removing the SIM card thing,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
do you think so? Are they saying that he removed the SIM card? I mean, that'd be the question: is did he remove the SIM card before or after? Well, unless the phone was off, right? If the phone was off, I guess it doesn't matter whether the SIM card was in there wherever the phone went. But if you know what I mean, if he was,
Yeah, why remove the SIM card? What's the point? I don't see the point.
yeah, I mean, apparently, so this comes up later when the police ask for his phone, and then he withholds his own SIM card, which I got something to say about the cops for that one. But I guess because of that, they couldn't instantly look up,
Yeah.
yeah, everywhere that phone had been. But then that doesn't mean that the phone company doesn't know, right? Obviously, they know if the phone was on and the SIM card was in it, like they know whatever data or whatever they transmitted to that phone, presumably, right?
Exactly. And let's remember the fact that as he is on this night trip with his two sons, and apparently he left Susan at the house. That's his official story. He said that he was getting phone calls. He was getting phone calls from family members in the morning, from like police or whatever. Like everyone was calling him, like, "Yo, this is Monday. Where's the kids? Where's Susan's?" Like, it's like, come on, pick up, Josh. Like, where are you guys? He wasn't picking up his phone, but he had incoming phone calls, like I'm sure plenty of them. But now Josh told police he didn't have a charger with him, and he was trying to uh, conserve the battery life of his phone. However, a detective actually noticed Josh's phone was plugged into a charger on the center console of his vehicle. So that's a complete lie. So he was receiving phone calls, and I mean, it's really hard to fathom how he wasn't in jail, to be honest.
This guy was so stupid because I mean the whole thing was. I mean, here's the thing. has, has your? I mean, like my family's never come to my house because they didn't hear from me and decided that I died from like carbon monoxide poisoning or something. I mean the only thing
Yes,
it's
same here.
so like the reason why that happened is because this was one of the sticking points in the marriage. This dude, Josh, was on the phone with his family on speakerphone all friggin' day normally. I think presumably mostly his dad, but like
Whoa.
there was this weird thing they had going on, like a total invasion of privacy. So they say like, by the way, this is once again credit. I always like to give credit to our sources. Stephanie Harlow, I think, is the one who pointed this out. She may have gotten this also from some of her research. But yeah, her point was like, what kind of marriage is this? Where like Susan doesn't even know when she has privacy or not when she walks in a room in her house and tries to talk to her husband
Mm,
because he's just and they weren't even talking. He would just be on like silent speakerphone all day long. So you're telling me that this guy forgot his freaking charger and this is the one. So this, by the way, so this is what happens all of a sudden. All of a sudden he's not on like the Josh show on this phone with his family, and they're like, "Oh, something's wrong. Josh isn't broadcasting his whole life to us all day." Yeah, I wonder why. Probably because he was killing his wife. But yeah, it's
whoa.
the whole thing was just. I mean, this guy's such a dummy because he thinks he's going to get away with this, and yeah, I mean, to your
Yeah.
point, it's something we're gonna harp on, but
Mm,
it just seems really weird. Like, I mean, dude, they arrested OJ, right? They arrested Robert Blake. All these other people get arrested when something goes wrong with the wife or ex-wife. This this dude had all these like. I mean, once again, it makes you wonder. Like, is this similar to some of our other cases where the police department just isn't this is not their normal territory, like where they're just not dealing with murders and
mm,
really deceptive people. Maybe they were so used to dealing with like a whole community full of mostly honest Mormons who were helpful and mostly told the truth, and you know what I mean. And then this this like deceiver comes in their midst, and the cops don't know what to do anymore.
maybe. I
It's
mean, the
just
cops.
baffling.
I feel like the cops probably, but that's a good point. But I feel like the cops probably run into all kinds of people everywhere. Now, police interviewed Charlie Powell. The son. I think he was the eldest one. As they were actually questioning Josh as well at the same time. So Charlie told police that the camping trip did in fact took place, but he told police that his mother Susan had came with them to the trip, but she did not return. A few weeks later, Charlie's school teacher said that Charlie claimed his mother is dead. Um, it's interesting. Also, Chuck and Judy Cox, which are Susan's parents, also later said that while at daycare, Braden drew a picture of a van with three people inside and told the daycare workers that, quote, "Mommy was in the trunk. So this is where we gauged that, we do think. I mean, the other comments of the two kids, they were pretty nonsensical from what I've gathered. So let's take this with the grain of salt, because the other stuff that they were talking about did not link up. Like in the timeline, we just have like the picked out creepiest points. So I don't know, maybe it was the case, maybe it wasn't. Can't really say for certain. The following day, December 8th, at 11 a.m., Josh calls Susan's father, Chuck Cox, to tell him that Susan is missing and that police are going to question him once again. So, really quickly, without stopping here for too long, is it true that Chuck Cox was in fact at the very very beginning, because later on he kind of got onto the whole thing, but like in the very beginning he did not necessarily suspect Josh of killing his daughter, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, it must. I mean, when you look at pictures of the guy, you don't get the bad vibe. I mean, even like, I mean, obviously you could say this with, is it the Chris Watts case,
Hmm.
um, who also, frankly, did a halfway decent job of looking innocent sometimes. I don't know. Josh he doesn't look like someone who's capable of killing his wife. If you were just to judge somebody by their looks,
Yes, I agree.
yeah,
I
and
agree.
plus, like you said, he was kind of a weakling. So,
Yeah. It makes sense. So okay, so Josh is getting questioned once again. During the second question, he kind of already says to police, they told me that I should have an attorney because they don't know what's going on. They said I'm pretty much in over my head. The police officer asks, okay, you're in over your head because of your wife is missing. Then he says, nope, because you guys are already trying to trap me a little on little things like cuts on my hands for one. So okay, so he had cuts on his hands, which doesn't really
him and OJ.
damn right. um let's jump to the following day. Oh no, not the following day. Let's stay. And by the way, I'm about to sneeze, but I might not sneeze. So let's stay on December 8th. Um, this is kind of crazy. After police seized his van that we believe he transported his wife in the trunk in, and stashed her body, he then rented a car at, well, that's crazy, because if I'm not mistaken, the police did not seize his van. One source that I was reading said that they implanted a bug to trail him so that he would show to them eventually where he stashed the body. Maybe if he went to the desert to restash it. So, okay, without stopping too quickly, do you know more information whether or not police seized his van? Because I remember specifically listening to a news report saying that they implanted a bug on his van and did not seize it. So what was the case? Have any idea?
So as I remember from the research that I did, they didn't. That was part of the problem was they didn't. They weren't on top of the warrants at all. Like and this is a part of the problem is he went home and he like cleaned everything, like right away the next morning. This guy is so freaking lazy you can't get him to do anything. Um, is cleaning the car. The car they don't have a warrant for, and he's going and he's cleaning right away, destroying potential evidence. So yeah, as I understand it, it was only later that that they got
Oh my
a
god.
warrant.
So
Yeah.
wait. You're telling me that they could have potentially found traces of Susan in the trunk, but they didn't
so,
because they didn't
so I'm
get the.
saying I don't understand. I don't understand what kind of police department this is. Do they not have crime? Where they like it's so frustrating because I mean I don't mean to laugh, but it's like that whole "come on, man" thing. I even wrote it in the notes. Like, what's going on? Like, you guys have one job. Your job is to solve crimes. Like, I think even police 300 years ago would know that you don't let the suspect go home and clean up the murder scene, potential murders, etc. Right? Destroy evidence,
Back in the
hide their
Rome,
guilt.
in the Roman Empire times, they knew
Yeah,
this. Like what?
yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure after Caesar got stabbed, they didn't all just let the janitor come in and clean the place, right?
Yeah,
I mean, what the hell's going on? Yeah. So, it's once again, I have to wonder, like, is it
yeah.
just they have so little of this going on in
Hmm.
that community that, this one this one dude who doesn't like play by the rules is suddenly like just has them tied in knots.
Yeah. Okay, really quickly. It says in the timeline that they did seize his car. Now, from what I've gathered beforehand, they didn't seize his car, but they planted a bug to track his location. Nevertheless, I know that he did, in fact, go to Salt Lake City International Airport and rented out a car there. And then he drove it for 800 miles. And this is, I think, happening on the following day of Susan's disappearance. Uh, he returned it 2 days later. At some point during his trip, he had purchased a cell phone and had activated it in Tremont, Utah, near the Utah-Idaho border. So I think at this point we still have to jump to the map. I haven't jumped to the map on this episode, but I think we need to really quickly jump to the map really quickly because this is, as I've said, West Valley City, um, in the Utah. Now this is Simpson's Spring Campground, but now he rents a car from Salt Lake City International Airport and drives in the northern direction right up until the state lines almost with Idaho to the north. So he, just for our listeners, so from West Valley City where he resided at, the campground is down south. But now we kind of assume that that's where he took Susan's body. But now, a few days later, he rents out a car from an airport and drives north. And we know that because he purchases a phone and activates it. So, in my mind, this kinda now looks like a potential red herring, but then again, he kinda is really stupid with all of his other things. So maybe he kinda got his stuff together a few days, cleaned the house, cleaned the van, and was like, okay, maybe this is a good strategic move to add in a red herring. Let's drive 800 miles to the north for no reason at all, just to throw the cops off. Like, or do you think that driving to the north was kind of something he had to do in relation to stashing the body, or what do you think happened there?
I'm going with the former, which you said that he did it to play games with the cops. So he thinks he's smart. This was the interesting thing, was apparently he and Susan were big time like true crime aficionados. Just like obviously our audience and us. And they used to like binge watch Law and Order, and he he had bragged at, I think, one of Susan's work parties, like a holiday party or something, that like he knew how to murder somebody and get away with it. What a smart thing to tell to the coworkers of your future victim. So he's got a very, this is an ongoing theme in his life, is he has a very inflated sense of self, and he's a narcissist as well. But despite all of my harsh criticism for his character, he was not a stupid guy. And even some of his interactions with the cops, I mean, a couple times, case in point, when he was supposed to turn over his phone and he withholds the SIM card and they don't even notice until, he's already gotten out of there. It does seem like he outsmarted them. The fact that they never arrested him for this also shows that, at least in the short term, before, he ended things, he had somewhat outmaneuvered them, strangely. So yeah, I mean, as otherwise I can't understand. I mean, he would have to be really stupid
Hmm.
to, after, now that he's under all the scrutiny, lead people to exactly where it was. It almost makes you wonder, like, to your point, if he was really just trying to lead them in the total opposite direction of wherever
Yeah.
the thing actually was. Yeah.
Now, 2 days into Susan's disappearance, that's December 9, police finally execute a search warrant. So I'm assuming, just as Josh got done cleaning the crime scene, they removed boxes, bags, and a computer. Police found Susan's blood. They also find a life insurance policy for 1.45 million on her name. So if she dies, it goes straight to Josh. So I think he, I don't know what that could entail potentially. And a letter from Susan fearing for her life. Police also find blood from an unknown male contributor. Okay, so it was blood. It was not DNA. It was blood from an unknown male contributor. So this is kind of immediately leaning towards either two people, Joshua's father or Joshua's brother. So the father would be Steven and the brother would be Michael, because Michael kills himself 1 year after Josh kills himself and kills his two sons, because then suspicions kind of got thrown on him. Or it might have been Steven, who knows, right? So, okay, what do you make of the insurance policies?
That's weird. I mean, do you think the insurance policies, I mean, if Susan did those in good faith, wasn't coerced or tricked into doing them somehow, do you think that she was hoping that at least her children would be provided for?
Perhaps, but I think in one of her videos or like letters expressing her concerns, she did say that, they had taken a lot of insurance policies on her life, not on Josh's, which is kind of interesting. Usually, I mean, I mean, she was making the money for the household, so maybe it was a good decision. But she didn't seem like she had health problems, to my understanding. So, what's the rush to get the life insurance? You know, kinda, I don't really get that. Well, we all know why they probably got done, because Joshua was kind of building up this whole potential accident for probably a handful of years now. Now let's jump to the following day. Police search the remote Simpson Springs campground for signs of a campsite that Josh claimed he used. They didn't find any evidence of camping in the location that Josh described. Uh, then, we have Josh talking to to the news team, two news reporter Chris Jones. And yeah, like the news overall kind of pressed him on the questions. Why did he take his kids camping in the middle of the midnight, pretty much on midnight in freezing conditions? And he was like, it's what I do all the time. Your take on on that whole ordeal? Like, how did he handle the media pressure?
I mean, yeah, I mean, and not just him, right? Like also his dad seemed to have like chimed in there, and I don't know, I think made things worse, really.
Yeah.
Maybe he was trying to distract, but yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, he definitely was feeling the pressure, I would say.
Yeah. Now, a few weeks after that, he actually moves for apparently moves to another state, to Washington, back to live with his father Steven. Initially it was supposed to be like a holiday trip, because they did in fact leave on December 18th. Now, shortly before their trip, Joshua hired an attorney and became less and less cooperative with law enforcement. So at first he said he went for the holidays, but in fact he had been fired from his job in Utah. So he went all the way to Puyallup, I think that's the name of the city, Puyallup in Washington. It's a smaller city, I think. Basically, family and friends held vigils for Susan, both in Utah and in Puyallup. In early January of 2010, so let's say a good almost a month after her disappearance, social media campaigns are launched to spread the word of Susan's disappearance. On January 6th, Josh Powell and his brother Michael, who we kind of believe that maybe his blood was found at the scene, they arrived back in the West Valley City to pack up the Powell home. It was then revealed by Josh's friends that he had been fired from his job. Josh claims he won't be able to keep the home, so he brought Michael with him to pack up the house to move to Puyallup, the Stevens home. Then January 26th 28th, I mean, so it's almost 2 months after the disappearance of Susan. Josh Powell comes back to West Valley from Puyallup to make repairs to his home in order to rent it out. The following day, on January 29th, the police, PD, served Josh Powell with a warrant seizing the blue minivan he drove the night Susan disappeared. So it was like 2 months after the fact. Geez, like that's a quick reaction. The following month, on February 15th, the Cox. This is great. This is insane, dude. I want your take on this one. 2.5, almost 2.5 months after Susan disappears, her family, the Cox family, held a press conference revealing that Susan had told family and friends that she might end her relationship with Josh by their April 6th anniversary, so it was still coming up. The Cox family said Josh had been physically abusive with Susan at least once in the past. Josh's controlling behavior was also revealed. So that's kind of crazy because apparently she told her family that she was gonna end their relationship by April 6th. So maybe maybe Josh in his head was thinking she's gonna end it by April 6th. The only way I will ever get my hands on 1.5 million is if I make it seem like she disappears or is killed by an accident before April 6th. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. That he had like this timeline, which I think maybe then addresses your earlier question about whether he had already resolved to make this happen.
Yeah. Steven Powell's neighbors, the creepy father of Josh Powell, put up missing person flyers and ribbons throughout his neighborhood. The Cox family said that this upset the Powell family. Um, Also, on April 10th, a volunteer search for Susan's body at Simpson Spring Campground, where Josh Powell claimed he went camping the night Susan disappeared, turned up nothing once again. On August 25th, West Valley City Police Department released how many man hours they spent and money on this case so far. So it was almost 7,000 man hours and $150,000. Interesting stuff kept happening, but now I think we need to jump to this point right here, and I want to ask your take on it. So literally on the 1 year anniversary of Susan's disappearance, Josh and Steven Powell make the claim that Susan ran away with Steven Kocher, another person who went missing, who was a Utah resident, and he went missing in the same week. And I think we might cover Steven Kocher next week. But they claim, Josh and Steven claim that Susan ran away with Steven Kocher, a man who went missing in Nevada in December 2009, even though he was from Utah. The two claim the pair may have run off to Brazil, of all places, where Kocher served an LDS church mission to start a new life. That's why they went there. Now, there is zero evidence to back up Josh's claims. So, what do you think? Do you think that they had, like, what do you make of this? Them claiming that Susan ran away with Steven Kosher to Brazil?
Can't you just see those two, like either they heard about it or they were on like a computer and they were just trying to think, like they were just commiserating together. How can we, how can we spin this? Who can we? What's our theory that we
Hmm.
can try to distract? And what's the lie we can spin to try to give some kind of deniability? I mean, by the way, it sounds just like the kind of douchey thing his dad would do.
Yeah.
Like I bet you that idea came from him.
Exactly. Thursday, August 25th, 2011. So, this is way, way down the line, almost getting up to those 2 year, almost getting up to the 2 year mark of her disappearance. Police from Utah and Washington State serve a search warrant on the Powell home. So, I'm assuming they're serving in Washington, Puyallup. In Puyallup, it says here. Police take computers, boxes and bags from the home. And now what they found is kind of insane, because they found uh, basically, first of all, what was insane is that during an ABC interview, Steven Powell, Josh's father, said that he shared father-in-law, daughter-in-law flirting and maybe some sexual touching or whatever, and that he enjoyed it. He said, I enjoyed it, frankly. So he says during an ABC interview that, that myself, being Steven Powell, and Susan Powell, we had a father-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship, and there was some sexual touching involved as well. This is like, it was taking a turn for the very, very creepy right here. You know what I mean? Not even cringy. Like, this is creepy.
I mean, it's like classic. I guess this is the cringe part about it is this this horrible narcissist that is Steven, that like I said, at some point, probably near the end, I'll uncork a little more on him, but he had to make it about himself, right? Of course, this narcissist, this guy that wants attention and aggrandize himself, and then somehow drag her name through the mud, and we know she's not alive, right? I mean, there's no way she's, as we'll probably get to. Um, but yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. And then I will say it was interesting because some of the stuff that was described, there was truth, presumably to, there was some kind of innocent, because this, it's important to realize, like, this Susan is coming from a sheltered environment. She doesn't necessarily have the social context for how someone else might interpret something that in her mind was very innocent, which was, it was something like she'd started some kind of like what was it, a course on, like, I can't remember, whatever it was. It was like she was showing off how she shaved her legs and asked him to touch it, and of course this jerk,
Whoa.
who always is thinking that everybody, loves him so much and wants to flirt with him, and he goes and he takes it to a whole other level. And meanwhile, this guy is so delusional that he had, I mean, like I said, the more I heard about what this guy had been up to
Well,
during their marriage.
it's coming
Yeah.
up. It's coming up because
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me not take the air out of it. Yeah. I think, anyway. Yeah. I just first thought that I think that was one of the big cringe moments when I'm like, oh my God, is this guy really gonna
Yeah.
gonna make it about him?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
what they actually, okay, so look, he made it about him on August 25th, 2011, when he said that he shared like some sort of a sexual touching relationship with Susan. Then 1 month later, police arrested him for child pornography and voyeurism like when you're a voyeur, like, you know, creepy, doing creepy stuff in public, I guess. With these charges, after police found thousands of images of young girls and women, including Susan, dressing and undressing. The photos were taken without the women knowledge, and actually two of his neighbor girls were victims, which were, I think, really young girls, and he had taken pictures like from his house. Like he took pictures into like the in the direction of the neighbor's home's bathroom. You know what I mean? I think you can understand like what how like pretty much like the situation right there, right? And then after this, Charlie and Braden Powell were placed in state custody while police investigate to see if anyone else knew about Steven's activities. Because everyone that knew about Steven's creepy stuff, which I kinda lean towards that Josh knew, would also get like really like hefty penalties as well. So your take on it. Do you think that Josh knew that his father had been taking secret pictures of his wife while she was undressing, taking secret pictures of his neighbor little girls in the bathroom, and just in general, all of that other interesting pictures? Do you think that Josh knew?
Yeah, I think so. I think Steven couldn't keep his stupid mouth shut. You know, he always wanted to show. I mean, maybe this is where Josh gets it from. He always wanted to show off how clever or how naughty or how how above it all he was, because he had done something. He had exposed his young sons to adult material and other sort of adult thoughts, and you know his kind of unfiltered philosophy of life way early, way early when they were you know, like I said, when they were children. And you know, as much as you know, this other thing that happens supposedly was a surprise to Josh, I really have to wonder. I mean, you know what I mean? This it doesn't seem like this guy, because there's another interview where like he confronts Susan's father at like some look where they were kind of picketing about something, and they had like a restraining order, and this dummy couldn't stay away. He even says stuff that basically I think gets him in trouble, or like kind of waives the restraining order, because he just has to get his 2 cents in front of the camera. Yeah, I think that he was
Mm,
not just
yeah.
not just Josh. I think Michael too.
Of course. Now, after that, the Cox family, you know, Susan's parents, filed in court to get the custody of Charlie and Braden, and the judge temporarily ruled that Josh Powell cannot publish Susan's teenage diaries online, because they had like a website. Let's not even get into that whole situation. They made a website where they gave like their potential theories what happened to Susan. Like Josh Powell and then Steven Powell made a website naming it susanpowell.org, where they kind of, you know, claimed their wacky theories that she ran off to Brazil or something. Now after that, you know, the custody of the two little boys were awarded temporarily to Susan's parents. Now Chuck Cox, you know, father of Susan, filed the motion in court on November 10th, 2011. So this is happening kind of very shortly after Steven Powell is booked for child pornography charges, and all of those creepy pictures were found on his computer. So that's when Susan's parents were like, we cannot let the two little boys live with these crazy people. So they asked in court for a motion for a judge to appoint a guardian for Charlie and Braden so that a custody investigation could begin. Have no idea what this is, but then what happens next? 4 days later, a judge sets a custody hearing for Charlie and Braden for the following year, 2012, January 19th. As I've said, then also we have, yeah, so basically, do you have any more stuff regarding the custody legalities, because I kind of wanted to just skip by it, but I know that
No.
you don't
Yeah.
really have any more. Yeah, because the culmination of the legalities were that I think, okay, let's read the following timestamp. Now we're jumping to 2012, the year when it all happened. Now let's when Josh Powell killed his kids and then exploded the house. So on Tuesday, January 31st, 2012. A website created days before the custody hearing by Josh Powell with the help from his family was disabled. So I'm assuming this was susanpowell.org. Now, in this site, on this site, there were claims that Chuck and Judy Cox abused Charlie and Braden. You know what I mean? So probably Josh Powell was writing, or his family members were writing in susanpowell.org that Susan's parents were abusing the two little kids. He was basically butthurt because he lost the custody. Now, police found hundreds of disturbing images on Josh's computer, included simulated child pornography, simulated, so not real. I think this is like 3D, like I don't know, animations, bestiality, and incest. And I want to quickly stop here, really quickly, without belaboring this point. When they found in January the creepy stuff on, now not on Steven's computer but on Josh's computer, is it true that it was in fact not Josh's creepy pictures, not Josh's bestiality, and not Josh's incest stuff, but it was the previous owners of the computer? Because how that whole situation worked, actually the computer was bought by Susan back when she was still not missing and was still alive, presumably. She bought a computer, a second-hand computer, and the previous owner of that computer did in fact had opened up like some sort of child pornography stuff, and that information was cached in the memory of that laptop. So just by opening it up and viewing it, like viewing child pornography, that's illegal, that's a crime, and you're gonna go to jail for that. But is it true that it was not Josh's, and it was in fact the previous owner's wrongdoing? Like, did that make sense?
Yeah. So I didn't run into a lot on this specific detail actually. So it sounds like you definitely ran into a whole other level of stuff about him. I mean, I will say that I never heard any allegations about Josh. Even given all his time on the internet. I mean, unless everybody was just incredibly naive, I never ran into anything that was similar to like what his father had been into, if that makes sense.
Perfect sense, actually. Now let's jump to the following day, which would be February 1st, 2012. So this is happening just 4 days before Josh brutally murders his sons and then kills himself. A Washington state judge ruled that at that point 7-year-old Charlie and 5-year-old Braden will remain with Chuck and Judy Cox, with Susan's parents. The judge ordered Josh to get evaluated. He was evaluated that he had adequate parenting skills, steady employment. He had no criminal record, which is kind of baffling, to be honest. And the examiner did decide to recommend that Josh Powell will get supervised visitations with his sons several times a week, and this decision led to the murder of the two kids, because literally 4 days after this, a social worker, I believe this maybe was the first time that after this judge's statement, the first time that he was supposed to get the kids now, but now I think he was worried that maybe they will take away his kids forever. Maybe if he was worried, we don't know what happened there. Maybe he was just angry at the world at that point. So February 5th, on Sunday, a social worker, Elizabeth Griffin, arrived at Josh Powell's trailer with Charlie and Braden for a supervised visit. So apparently he was living in a trailer at that point, because at all times the caretaker, like I mean the social worker needs to supervise the whole visit. That was the law. So maybe this is what kind of drove Josh over the tipping point. Now, as the two kids ran into the house, because apparently they still had affection for their father, Josh Powell actually slammed the door in the face of Elizabeth Griffin, the social worker that was supposed to supervise them inside of the trailer. Now she calls 911. There's 911 calls on this. You can find them online. They're very disturbing. She in fact made two calls. On the first call, she said, this man who I brought his kids for a supervised visitation just closed the door, and I'm sensing smell of gasoline coming out of the trailer. The police is like, we'll bring someone over when we can, and then the next call that she made, well, they kind of were reacting. I don't want to put shade on the police or anything like that right there. The second call was in fact when the house had exploded with Josh and the two kids inside of it. So basically, Josh explodes the house. Then the social worker calls 911, tells that the house had exploded. He killed everyone, but then when they rummage through the explosion, they find a hatchet next to the bodies. And then when they were doing autopsies, they found that the hatchet was used on the little kids' necks and head, which is, nightmare-inducing stuff. He was trying to chop their, like, I don't know what was that all about, right? And then apparently I heard a quote that it failed, and then he was like, I'll just end everything, and then he exploded the trailer. So what do you make of the fact that he was like not just doing some sort of quick death, quick explosion? He literally got a hatchet to kill the two kids. What's that all about?
I don't know why I want to be, charitable towards his intentions for all the stuff we talked about, but I guess because it sounds so horrible what he did, part of me just, I don't know what how you can make this any better, but part of me hopes that he was trying to like maybe knock them out or kill them quickly with the axe before he blew up the place. Like he had planned. Like I wonder if he had planned to blow up the place regardless, but he's like,
But there was on the head and on the neck.
right on the head. So like
So it's
if you
like,
get hit, if you get hit in the head with an axe or a hatchet, you're probably going out, right? Like you're not going to
wouldn't
be
you just
conscious
like
for it.
have like a better way of doing than a hatchet? Like there, in my opinion, there are better ways. Yeah.
It's horrible. Yeah, I always
Yeah.
feel like burning alive. Like if it doesn't explode. So, by the way, was it specifically? I just want to make sure
Mhm.
I get this detail right from the social, because this is something Stephanie Harlow didn't go into that much, and some of my other sources didn't go into as much. Did she smell gas or gasoline? So like natural gas, because like a lot of
Can't really
or
say for sure.
okay, gasoline. So gasoline, petrol in Europe, right? Gasoline does vaporize pretty quickly when it's like exposed to air, and it can explode like that. I just feel like, I mean, far be it from me to suggest this, but if I had to choose between burning to death, um, and being hit in the head with a hatchet, I think I'd choose the hatchet.
I think it was an
Just
explosion.
yeah, even the explosion, it's like, you know what I mean. It's not
They
like it's
found when they looked into it, they saw that the fire was deliberate. It was deliberate, after two 5-gallon cans of gasoline were found on the premises, as well as evidence the gasoline was spread throughout the house. So it was gasoline that was spread out throughout the house.
So I mean, that's a lot of gasoline, and it vaporizes. So, but I mean, it's not like it's dynamite. I mean, it is true that a gallon, just 1 gallon of gasoline that has been completely vaporized has an explosive power that is comparable to, I think, some number of sticks of dynamite. I learned that in Boy Scouts from a fire marshal. um, but I mean, like just whether or not you would die from, let's say, the loss of, well, getting blown up. Like it was, I mean, the fact that they found the bodies in the axe and could tell that they'd been chopped on makes me think, okay, that explosion was not like as cataclysmic. It probably sucked the air out of the room. It may have been enough to knock somebody unconscious, but like I said, I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to defend his method of killing his children, because it's not what I'm trying to do. But if I were to guess why he did that, other than, I guess the other explanation would be that he was such a malicious, narcissistic jerk, um, and monster at that point, that he was willing to, I guess, just destroy his two children, like in what is a pretty, I mean, you and I don't even really want to talk about it, what he did to those two children. I just keep on thinking, like, yeah, if it were me and like I was in my car caught fire and I was trapped in my car, probably around the time I start burning to death is when I wish somebody would hit me in the head with a hatchet. Is like what I would have to choose between, like, the two ways of dying. It's not that I want to die,
Yeah.
and I'm for sure those kids didn't want to die. They thought they were going to their father, who was going to love them. But yeah, it's friggin' horrible. And by the way, I guess this is why Susan's parents, I guess, started campaigning for a law to change those whole visitation rights. Because in this case, what good was the supervised visit, right? If this dude could just, if he's like a dead ender, like I got nothing after this anyway, so I'm just going to go out with a bang and do all the damage I can. Well, then that supervised visit was nothing, right? That lady didn't have a gun. She couldn't stop him.
The visit either had to happen, like it should happen, like in a controlled environment, but maybe it's too much of an expense to do that. So I think what they
Right.
try to do is to make it illegal to grant visitation rights for anyone who is being investigated for murder, which is, I think, a pretty rational decision, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The whole thing. I mean, like it's funny. It's interesting because I'm sure we could find somebody that might get mad at us, because the whole thing about um, like spousal rights, and there's a lot of, like, he said she said that goes into these laws, because there's people on both sides of these kind of like domestic disputes that abuse the law. Like there are husbands that falsely accuse their wives of stuff, and use the
Yeah.
children as pawns, and vice versa. Women that make false claims about abuse, and then just to be malicious in the same way that Josh was malicious to his wife and to his in-laws. There's people on the other side that do the same thing. So yeah, it gets complicated. But yeah, I mean, that seems like a no-brainer, right? Like, if this dude is accused of killing the mother, well, why would you want him around children until we can really, like, figure this out? So yeah.
Really quickly to finish off the timeline, Josh's brother Michael Powell, 1 year after Josh Powell kills his two sons and himself, 1 year after that, his brother Michael Powell, he was believed by many to have helped Josh with Susan's disappearance. He killed himself as well. He jumped off a parking garage in Minneapolis, taking any secrets to the grave. During previous interviews with police, it's discovered that Michael had abandoned a Ford vehicle at an Oregon wrecking yard at one point, and that vehicle was found. And they looked into it. They found in that vehicle traces of a body being in the vehicle. And at one point, Michael Powell ordered pictures, satellite pictures for for like the yard, like the, what's it called, like the parking garage or whatever. I mean, I'm sorry, the wrecking yard. Come on, I can't talk today. The wrecking yard. He ordered satellite pictures of the wrecking yard just to see if the car was still in there and was not destroyed. So I think he was clearly wishing for that car to be destroyed, and now it wasn't. They looked at it and they found that the human remains were there, most likely, in that vehicle, because dogs, I think, alluded to it. Maybe they did some DNA testing as well. So logistically, this is a huge mess, because if that car was involved, that would mean that Michael maybe went to the area, retrieved Susan's body and stashed it somewhere else, then tried to get rid of that Ford vehicle by, selling it to the scrapyard for it to get like destroyed. But then it wasn't, because logistically this kind of immediately hints to me that maybe as Josh killed Susan, stashed it somewhere, Michael most likely later on went to that place in this Ford vehicle, put her body in the trunk and moved it somewhere else. You know what I mean? Because maybe at that point Michael had less heat on him, and maybe initially they left Susan's body in such a place where it could be found. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely makes sense. I mean, it does make you wonder what, because you don't really see a history of suicide with the older generation of the Powell family, at least not that we know of. So it seems rather strange that both brothers would kill themselves,
1 year,
within.
within one
Yeah.
year, and then their father, the creepy Steven Powell, dies at Tacoma Washington Hospital in 2018. He was, I think, a free man at that point, because he did serve like a 7-year child pornography case. The sheriff's office was not aware that Powell was in the hospital, but they were told that Stephen Powell was recovering in 2008. Now, Ed Troyer, a spokesperson for the sheriff's office, said at the time, "I wish we could have talked to him before he died, because maybe on his deathbed he would have told them everything." And I think, to be honest, when I think rationally, I think you could expect potentially for Stephen Powell in his deathbed to spill the beans. Like, for me, wouldn't you agree? Like, he's the type of guy that he's like, he can't keep his shut mouth, and if he's dying, then I think he may spill the beans.
That's true. I didn't think of that. I mean, I was thinking, what else will they spill the beans about? Maybe he's going to tell us he also killed Kennedy and he's a Lindbergh baby.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? I guess I always think of there's a couple other famous serial killers where, they just use that opportunity to keep on, being a narcissist and keep on trying to claim more, I guess, than they really can legitimately claim.
Yeah, well, on my end, dude, we went through the timeline. As I've said, the theories part, or the questions part, is not really existent on this episode. For me, as I've said, really tight week. I just looked into the case. I like all the interesting questions that I had, or like thoughts I already disclosed in the timeline discussion of the Susan Powell's disappearance. But I know that you prepared really heavily, so I don't know. Is there anything that you would like to maybe portray regarding this case before we sign out?
Yeah, there was one specific thing. So I guess as I listened to the case, and I guess probably in part because the research I listened to was shaped this way, it just really seemed obvious to me that Stephen Powell, to me, at least, this is my opinion, Stephen Powell was the big shaper of all these things that happened, and it was frustrating with me because he wanted to be like this, like, rebel, I guess so. Let me give real. I'm just going to try to give a little thumbnail biography of him,
Yeah.
because this comes up really prominently. So the deal is, he's from this Mormon background. He marries a woman from the same community. They have a marriage together, and then way early in his marriage, he's like starting to talk about how like he's attracted to this other guy's wife, and like how he would marry her if something happened to this guy, if this guy died, and the wife's like, oh, I don't like this because we don't do plural marriage in the part of the mainstream Mormon religion we're in, and I don't think any wife wants to hear about how her husband likes some other lady, and then she's even starting to worry like this guy's acting like such an awful narcissist and crazy person that, gosh, maybe he would like make something happen to this lady's husband, just so he could fulfill this fantasy. And this guy's just gets worse and worse. Like he's like starts. I mean, it sounds like supposedly it's because he decides he doesn't believe in the Mormon faith anymore, and he starts propagandizing that out to the kids and stops going to the church stuff. And look, I mean, that's like a personal choice, though. I mean, I would say if you got into a marriage under a different set of circumstances and then you have kids, you really have to both agree about what you're going to tell the kids. But it's just this whole thing is really obnoxious because this guy's such a narcissist that he gets into like these weird fantasies, and then he starts kind of obsessing about even his own daughter, which was I guess one of the really horrible, gross, cringy parts about this thing. And through all of this, I guess not only that, but when the children are growing up, he's like making fun of them and giving them a hard time if they believe in the religion. I think it was Josh specifically was in a Latter-day Saints, a Mormon Boy Scout troop, and he eventually quit it because the dad kept making fun of him because it was a Mormon Boy Scout troop. Just all these things where it's very obvious that his sons were a product, to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just my opinion. I keep on thinking that I don't know. I mean, from my opinion, I don't see Josh as doing this biologically. Like if it's like nature versus nurture, I'm normally like kind of split between that, because I do see people, who have mental illnesses or other like potentials that are sort of determined a little bit by genes and by other things, by and then you see in a bad environment, you see like a lot of these serial killers, even people we haven't covered yet, they have horrible childhoods. And Josh didn't have a horrible childhood, but I would say he had a less than optimal one. And he had one with a father who was really kind of one of the worst role models someone could be without being a felon, I guess. And then it turns out he was a felon, right? Because he was committing felonies in terms of the voyeurism and adult materials. And then there's something we didn't even really go into that much, was when he confessed his love to Susan, and this whole thing about how he thought they were having some kind of emotional affair, and she's like, WTF, like I know I'm not into you at all, like I thought you're my husband's father and I was being a good daughter-in-law. Just all this stuff that happens with this guy just makes it all about him. I can't help but think like, how could the kids be any different than their awful dad? I mean, they could. I mean, they have free will, but there's this guy's in their life. And here's, I guess, just kind of just end it here or trail off. I really got to think like two things. One question for you is, I can't help but think that a lot of this guy's fantasies and fetishes and stuff is like all about the transgressive. So I almost think that he was too chicken shit to actually really quit the Mormon way of life and go make another life. Because if he had cojones on him, if he was brave, Steven I'm talking about, not Josh.
Yeah.
If Steven was brave, when he was having these like second thoughts about his community and the whole way of life, and before he started just being a jerk to everybody in his life, maybe he should have just walk out of the house, walk out of that community. I mean, he's not respected he shouldn't have been respected by that community at that point, the way he's acting and the stuff he's been doing. Like, he should have just gone off and like been a hippie or whatever it is he wanted to be, go live that counterculture life and suffer the consequences of whatever comes of like living that other life that is the one different than the one you're rejecting. But he was such a jerk to stay in it and just make a hard time for everybody else. And really, I mean, I'd say like it's too bad he didn't get hit by a bus when he was a kid, because he would have probably made a lot of other people's lives better by that happening. But he didn't, and I can't help but wonder how much of what he was doing was because it was naughty, was because someone else didn't want him to do it, and that's why he kept. You know what I mean? It's like all about him. It's
Mm.
like, look at me, I'm the naughty kid. I mean, what do you think about that?
Um, well, I didn't really run into this. I kind of, well, I not run into this. I didn't really think of this. I think for me, it was always that he was like some sort of a creepy guy. I feel like there's a lot more creepy guys like him that than is known publicly. Like in your neighborhood, dude, there's some creepy guys because, like,
Oh
seriously,
yeah.
just go, dude, just go on the sex offender list. Seriously, dude, after the
Yeah.
show, go on the sex offender list or like the app and check. Dude, I'm certain you're gonna find at least one in your neighborhood because I
Oh,
know
there's
during
there's
the there's
tons.
tons.
Yeah.
I've done on the Delphi case when I was doing it. I checked the sex offender app. Dude, sex offenders are everywhere. So what I'm gonna say here, he's just one of the creepy dudes. Like there's a million creepy dudes like in your neighborhood. Like your next door neighbor might be like a complete. You don't never know yet. I mean, same for me, same for everyone. Like your neighbors are most likely complete creeps.
That's a perfect segue before I get to the next last question about him, or maybe I've already kind of put it out there, but then I have to wonder because like I've done that. I've looked up. We have it's called Megan's Law where I live, and there's a website, and yeah, you look it up, and I live in a fairly dense suburban area, suburban Los Angeles. So there's like 50 of them within like a mile of me. Oh yeah, yeah, and it's crazy because some of them are women. Some of them are, some of the people that they look like, oh yeah, that guy looks like a creep, but then you see like, what did that lady do? And then like
Yeah.
for all of them, I can't help but wonder what the hell happened in their house when they were a kid. So Steven, I'm extending that question to Steven. I'm saying I don't think that this came out of nowhere. Like I don't think this guy is just, broken brain chemistry. He's not acting like a schizophrenic or like somebody with kind of the bipolar.
Mm.
Maybe there's some history of bipolar in their family for sure, but I don't really hear about major depressive episodes. I see some probably manic behavior out of him, um, or needy behavior out of him and Josh. I mean, that's something. If we ever do a follow up, we could probably go into like some of his really needy and um, hole in your soul kind of behavior, where Josh, I'll say Josh specifically, kept on trying he kept on trying to find that thing that was going to make him happy. So Josh kept on like buying stuff. Like he would buy the best stuff and none of it made him happy. And then he and his dad, it was almost like they kept on trying to buy themselves another person. Like another, not buy, what I mean, find themselves, I guess, another wife. Like, oh, this wife isn't good enough for me. This girlfriend, like nothing's ever good enough for them. The job's never good enough for them. Nothing's ever gonna like nothing's making them happy, and they keep on thinking, well, that next thing over the horizon, that next girl, that next camera, that next drill is going to make me happy and fix me. And I always wonder, like, Steven, what the hell happened in his house when he was growing up? Where did this narcissism come from? I have deep suspicions
Hmm.
that he grew up in a household where he was not loved enough and was not given enough attention, was neglected in some way. And I think, unfortunately, I'm not saying that this accounts for like anywhere near 100% of what Josh did, or like there's a lot of other,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously this is like both to not be controversial,
Hmm.
but also because in honesty, I don't know, but I can't help but think, I can't help but ask if there wasn't a Steven, if there was some other dad, would Josh have been not would Josh have done the crimes or not, but would Josh have been the way he was with just all these things with like his personal relationships, his approach to work, his approach to life, his irresponsibility with money and like buying crap for himself and treating people as a means to an end instead of you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like I can't help but think that this is deeply this is behavior that was learned as a child from this very selfish, narcissistic person, and it was essentially like contagious narcissism.
Not even sure how to react to this. If I'm sure that it didn't help that his father was some sort of a major creep who was taking secret pictures of like little girls in bathrooms. It didn't help. I'm gonna leave it at.
Yeah.
It probably didn't help. But that was some really good thoughts. Yeah, dude.
All right. Well, that's it for me. The one other thing I wanted to throw out, I actually wish I'd done this at the head of the show, is that without not patting ourselves on the back, but just saying we have noticed that we have gotten like a massive amplification in the number of people downloading our podcast. This is across devices and apps, etc. And I think maybe it's because it's always great when you have, like, I know I've done this with Rogan. Not saying we're Rogan, but I know that like I would sometimes listen to the show, and sometimes I'd watch the show, and often I would do both, right? Especially if it was one of my favorite topics. So just throwing it out there that as people get back to work and you're commuting and you want to maybe hear the show before you watch it on YouTube or vice versa. The show's out there. It's doing, pretty well now. We're really proud of it and everything we've accomplished on it. And we really appreciate everybody's support.
Yeah, definitely, that's true. We had a spike of downloads for sure on the apps, which is really nice, like a massive spike. Like that's like multiple time spike, like X amount of times over like 1 week. So that was really nice of you guys who are now listening. Thank you so much. And as always, we will join you next week. As I've said, we're probably gonna do the Stephen Kosher case, because it's kind of like a weird little connection that we could like exploit. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Have a nice rest of your week and stay safe, and peace out.